I'm promising myself that this will be a quick 20 minutes-ish in and out look at the satire of these worlds and not a full video essay. I have enough multi-hour videos to edit as it is. Satire comes in many forms, but I think we can generally agree that it's where you take something, often the political system, and you twist it into its most extreme version of itself to show off how stupid it is. A lot of exaggeration compared to the norm, and bitter irony is baked in. It doesn't have to be haha funny to count as satire. So millions of Imperial Guardsmen may die to take a world from the Orcs, only for chaos to invade and make the world uninhabitable. That is standard 40k, and it's basically what happened in the Space Marine game. Something something, but then suddenly Chaos Demons is pattern storytelling for Warhammer 40,000. Hopefully they don't do the same thing with Space Marine 2. Helldivers 2 is a new, popular online shooting game. Warhammer 40,000 is a long-running grimdark science fiction series based around the tabletop wargame, and because of the popularity of Helldivers 2, Starship Troopers has had a resurgence in the public consciousness, and videos about it are trending on the internet, so YouTubers of all kinds have come to talk about it. Shush. Self-awareness is cool. When I first watched the 1997 Starship Troopers film, I thought it was great, over-the-top silly fun. I didn't know much about Operation Desert Storm and the rhetoric, so it initially went over my head in a mix of cool music and bug shooting and ultra-violence. Did you know that there are 5 Starship Trooper movies? Would you like to know more? Well, not this tangent. Let's keep tangents to a minimum. And only the first film is really good. Rewatching it, Johnny Rico goes on a reverse of the standard character arc. He starts as a good person, he's kind, he has fun, but through the death of his parents, the death of his mentor, the death of Best Girl, he loses all that and just wants to kill bugs. Come on, you ape, you wanna live forever! He becomes another part of the military-industrial complex ready to die and send others to their deaths for a government that cares little for him.
Fresh meat for the grinder, eh?
I hadn't realised that Carmian was faking it when she said,
"Say it once. Try on for size."
I love ya. Yeah, it's better in my voice. But in 1997, the only girls I was interested in were the brand new Sisters of Battle. We see 4 adults in the civilian setting at the start of the film. Johnny Rico's 2 parents, who are not citizens and are whole-bodied and sound like standard people. And when we see the 2 teachers, one is missing part of an arm, another is blinded, and it is hammered home with the 5th adult we meet, who takes the papers to sign up the main characters.
Good for you. Mobile infantry made me the man I am today.
Starship Troopers works because the characters inside it follow the logic of their world. It feels real, and you didn't realise how quickly you would side with a military dictatorship. But the satire is there, definitely in the adverts.
Everyone's doing their part. Are you?
Now, minor tangent, very minor. I like the Earth Defense Force games. 1 and 2 only came out in Europe and Japan, 3 and 4 were basically remakes of the first 2 games, and then EDF 5 is a new continuity. The later games have quite a bit of "everything is fine, we're winning, do your part" voiceovers. They work so well because they are obviously turn-off-your-brain arcade-style shooting against generic ants, bees and spiders and cliché spaceships from the 1950s and 60s monster movies. Movies like Them. But it works because the voiceover has the characters acting consistent with their setting. They're not being self-aware. I even recommend playing that over Helldivers. There's a good first-person mode and online play. Now Helldivers wears the Starship Troopers film not so much on its sleeve, but it has skinned it and is wearing the whole thing as a bodysuit. There's the choice of enemies, and there's the music. Plus it adds in the real world stuff to satirize. That is more overt to us because, in the modern day, the news is everywhere and constant. Now Super Earth is a managed democracy. AI vote for you. Managed democracy offers absolute freedom. Freedom from the burden of choice. I've chosen to cut out the bit where I gave some examples of modern countries that are ostensibly democratic but don't give you much if any choice. I will leave that for your own minds, but leave a comment that says, "For Super Earth." In the lore of Helldivers, the automatons don't really want to fight. The bugs are peaceful, and at one time were domesticated. The thing about the bugs, the Terminids, is that when they're dead, the bugs produce oil for faster than light travel. Sorry, I meant E710, which, when turned upside down, sort of spells oil. Really? No one got that? Okay, some of you. But you knew oil was the reason for the war with the Terminids. It's very much an, oh, are we the baddies? I think I've heard this one before. So Helldivers is overt in its parody of certain countries deciding to invade other places for oil under what, to us now, sound like absurd pretexts. It also really loves to use the taglines of modern politics. Yes, I do like liberty. And it does the same contrast that the Starship Troopers film does in the propaganda, making the war sound good, over the top of the human suffering. Warhammer 40,000 has books, tabletop rules, games, and films. And it draws from a lot of places. It takes from Starship Troopers, but it takes inspiration from everything. The Tyranids are a lot like the Starship Troopers pseudo-arachnids, but also like the aliens from Alien, among other things. And it has Cadian shock troops. Their armour is a lot like that of the mobile infantry as shown in the film, but they've changed it up a bit in the more recent models. The big difference between 40k and Helldivers is that the civilians living in the 41st millennium know that things are terrible. To be a man in such times is to be one amongst untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. These are the tales of those times. That is a quote. They have that in like every book. It is bad and everyone knows it. But it is framed as a necessary evil as well as being evil. When every planet has a tithe for war and the Imperial government doesn't care how the planet is run, just that it delivers the tithe of food or soldiers or weapons as dependent on the kind of world it is, there is no focus or interest in healthcare, unless it is cheaper than just throwing more soldiers into battle. But there's a reason that Hearts of Iron 4 players don't usually get the field hospitals upgrade. The setting of Helldivers could take a peaceful coexistence with the automatons, but without the Terminids' oil they would be limited in their sphere of expansion, but it could be peaceful. If a different regime was in control in Starship Troopers, then there could be peace with the pseudo-arachnids, who of course definitely have the weapons capable to propel meteors towards Earth. The government was never losing control and never needed to hold on to power. In 40k, there is no choice. The Tyranids are coming to eat you, the Orcs will kill and enslave you, the Necrons will atomize you, and the Warp Demons will eat your soul. We don't mention the Dark Eldar. Doesn't matter if you care about peace, there is no option. But it is a reminder that just because you are fighting bad people, or people who have done bad things, doesn't make you the good guys. So it isn't cheeky satire in the lore, but the fans make it fun. There's the Death Korps of Krieg. Now in the lore, they are sent from their planet to the trenches, and they are happy to die because of a messed up cult of sacrifice where they must atone for their ancestors having a civil war against the Emperor, and also atone for the Loyalists winning and making much of the planet uninhabitable. Their only export to fulfill the required tithe is manpower. They're a grim look at the horrors of trench warfare in World War I and the German ideal of a soldier from around that time who is willing to die for their country. The new models use the French World War I fireman helmet. That is what it's known as. The satire is pretty straight, and it's grim. Barely a parody, certainly not fun, until the fans get a hold of it, and then the Death Korps of Krieg, they love trench warfare. They love shovels and digging and dying for the Emperor, and they're very eager to spend a decade or more in the trenches until they die. The fans make it work as a parody. While Starship Troopers takes from the 90s politics and mocks it and makes it more extreme, Helldivers takes from post-September 2001 politics and mocks it, 40k was grounded in the counterculture of the 1980s. The issue with that is that the counter-politics are now mainstream, some of the radical and scary politics of the time are now standard and not questioned, or some events are seen by a lot of people as no longer being relevant. Some people have never forgotten the 1980s miners' strike, but it has been so long that looking at the miners of the Genestealer cult rising up to resist the Imperium, it looks so divorced from its origin that the influence is going to be doubted. And remember that with 40k there is never just one influence, so the Lovecraftian and the Ridley Scott elements come to the fore. The creation of the Space Marines in Rogue Trader involved the government rounding up street punks and hypno-indoctrinating them to become Space Marines loyal to the Imperium. That is messed up. But now the creation of these supermen, it sounds worse when translated into German, it's a cool thing in the lore that people like to know, and the creation of the Space Marines is linked more to the Hunger Games to decide who is worthy. Still messed up, but less politically associated. And what was opposing views in the 1980s became agreed upon more recently. If you think back just over 10 years, all parties agreed that Margaret Thatcher should have a state funeral. They just disagreed on if she had to be dead before they went through with burying her. Oh, there's a tangent. Yes, let's go on a tangent. Okay, bring your coat and let's go. Okay, we're talking about a monster that destroys lives. While we're currently in the 10th edition of Warhammer 40,000, if we think back to 2nd edition, and I've been playing since 2nd edition, okay, you may not remember back to 2nd edition Warhammer 40,000, but in White Dwarf 134, the Iron Orc was introduced as just a fun name for a model by Andy Chambers. He picked the name Ghazghkull Mad Uruk Thraka for one of his own guys. Same as you may have an army led by Canoness Matilda or Space Marines under a captain of the Red Hawks chapter. That's a made up chapter. Just had to double check it wasn't real. There are very similar names, but no Red Hawks. So to give him his full name, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka is usually called Ghazghkull Thraka or just Ghazghkull these days. But the name is somewhat similar to the former British Prime Minister and current corpse, who got Ding Dong the Witch is Dead trending when she did die. Andy Chambers, a key person at Games Workshop and inventor of the character, had said the name came from his LARP days, where he made up a Pig Latin style orc language to talk to other orc players. He said he played games to forget about the Wicked Witch, not to have her in any way involved. That was in a Facebook comment by him. So Ghazghkull is not Thatcher, but people choose to ignore that because it is more fun to pretend that it is. I'm choosing to ignore this because it would kill any fun in my video that I'm trying very hard to not make serious or too political. Now, Games Workshop has never mentioned the connection, but this too has also been considered part of Games Workshop's moving to be less political and more marketable in the 3rd and 4th edition of 40k. Okay, tangent over. Where were we? Ah yes, Warhammer 40,000 is less overt in what it is a parody of because of how long it has been since the events and the people it was parodying. So from the outside, it looks like it could be played straight. The massive poster of the glorious superhumans taking on the aliens is a real poster of 10th edition and is not meant to be satire or depicting a propaganda piece within the world. It is there to drive sales to get you to buy Space Marines. So Warhammer 40,000 is more likely to attract the wrong sort. Okay, yes, I suppose we can have time for one more tangent. Not everyone understands what is satire, and you can certainly get to the point that something is so similar to the thing it claims to be satire of that it is definitely no longer satire. The Starship Troopers book is very different to the film in tone. Written in 1959 by Robert Heinlein, it takes a nukes are cool, war is awesome kind of approach. If it ever was meant to be satire, or just a what-if look at a world run by the military, it certainly loops back around to sounding like the author thought it was a good idea. The world is perfect, has basically no social problems, and is run by veterans who are the only ones with the right to vote. Only they have the moral discipline to make the right choice.
What's the moral difference, if any, between a civilian and a citizen?
A citizen accepts personal responsibility for the safety of the body politic, defending it with his life. A civilian does not.
Do you believe it?
In the book, capital punishment is good, war is good, and Rico's dad survives and joins the military and says he was wrong about not being a citizen and then becomes a sergeant under Rico. It's been a while since I read it, but I remember thinking that being whipped would probably not make any teenagers I knew better behaved. The film went with a more human face. No jetpacks called the bounce to travel around, no power armor. The arachnids had to seem like a threat to make the film more believable, and half the budget went on animating the arachnids. The directors wanted to take the plot of Heinlein's book, but deconstruct and parody the militarism and support for warfare. Because Verhoeven, one of the directors, grew up in German-occupied Netherlands, and he was not a fan of those things. So there is a clash, a militaristic source material and directors that seek to parody that, and the potential sliding of society into militaristic totalitarianism. The response the film got was not great. Newspapers reported that it was overtly pro-totalitarian, or said it wasn't able to live up to the morals and the themes of the book. Word of mouth got out that it was a nasty film, and it didn't do amazingly. But it survived as a cult classic, and about 20 years later, it is widely considered to be a good satire and a good film. Now, the people playing Helldivers get that it is horrible, and it is very overt with its satire. There are robots stealing babies, they are space communists, they have commissars, or perhaps the communism part is super Earth slander and the bots just want a less managed kind of democracy. And they don't actually want to take over or eliminate humanity. There isn't a lot of in-game lore for Helldivers. Most of the lore comes from fans. It's a developing thing, and people keep throwing themselves at Malevelon Creek because it is the funny meme planet. In the comments there will be people elaborating more on the lore, but the satirical side is made super obvious, and I don't think there have been any real incidents that cause issues. Hopefully no one is going to a political rally dressed as a Helldiver asking their candidate to establish a managed democracy. Helldivers is the overtly, haha this is so stupid kind of satire. Some of 40k has that. Orc players are an example. In general, they know that rushing at a gun line while screaming is stupid, it will get them killed, and yet sometimes it works. It's a lot of fun to do. Most of 40k is the dystopian extremism kind of satire, where the in-universe, this is good, and the buy Space Marines as the goodest guys marketing can become lost on people. That is why I defined satire at the start, to have a general understanding, because a lot of fans don't see 40k as satire. Now this is mostly fine, but there is the occasional person that sees 40k as a place where their extreme ideologies are accepted. The incident I'm referring to was when a player who went under the gamer name Austrian Painter entered a 40k tournament. It wasn't run by Games Workshop, but by an independent group. Only the events at Warhammer World Nottingham are officially run by Games Workshop. The player was wearing, okay, YouTube did not like that term. Let's say he was wearing clothing with a spicy windmill emblem on it. Just think of a windmill, but with spikes on the 4 blades. Some players refused to play against this fellow and asked for him to be removed from the tournament. The tournament organisers did not remove the player and didn't impose penalties on him for opponents skipping games. This may be surprising for many people, but if I told you this happened in Spain, maybe a few more of you will have a light bulb moment as to why. Okay, I'll explain. In a short, simplified way. Until the 1970s, Spain had the same government, run by the same person who had run the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s. He liked the spicy windmills, and after his death, Spain got back to democracy, but to prevent violence or another civil war, laws were put in place to prevent discrimination based on someone's past or present political affiliation, or support of a political ideology or group. So as a spicy windmill enjoyer who knew these rules, when the tournament organisers were called over, he said that if they threw him out because of his attire and choice of gamer name, then he would call the police or a lawyer, and it would not go well for the tournament organisers. So it was less hassle for them to let him play on. The 40k community internationally got word of this, mainly the worry of who 40k was letting in, or encouraging, and importantly not throwing out, but the reason why they weren't thrown out was lost in translation. It prompted Games Workshop to say, "This is satire. There are no goodies in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, especially not the Imperium of Man." So they put out a quote saying, "We believe in and support a community united by shared values of mutual kindness and respect. Our fantasy settings are grim and dark, but that is not a reflection of who we are or how we feel the real world should be. We will never accept nor condone any form of prejudice, hatred, or abuse in our company or in the Warhammer hobby. And said, if you come to a Games Workshop event or store and behave to the contrary, wearing the symbols of real-world hate groups, spicy windmills, you will be asked to leave. So since they had to put out a statement saying, we do satire, it was obvious that 40k was being not considered satire, at least in a lot of people's minds, and not necessarily the people who just played 40k, but the outside world, if there is such a thing, where everyday people would know, oh yeah, Warhammer 40,000, that has the spicy windmills. There is more to the difference in satire between Helldivers and Warhammer 40,000, but I'm not going to go too far into it, because looking at the timestamp, it has been going on long enough. Some other ideas to consider is that 40k is British, and in dark British satire, things get bad, but are technically still functioning. The bins still get collected. American satire, or satire intended for an American audience, tends to be really overt and scream, "This is satire!" so that people get it. That may just be how it seems to me. This is being demo-crazy instead of democracy. I don't mean this in a, well, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil. But just remember that mainstream right-wing British politics is considered standard left-wing American politics. And I'm British. Now let's forget politics and satire and talk about the gameplay. That's a fun way to end. I played a bit of Helldivers. Now by yourself, it lacks the satire within the gameplay, and it's the satire that gets you into the game. As you get paired with random people online, it just doesn't feel the same. There is no great progression or change in what you do. If you like the gameplay loop, you will like the game. But 3 hours of Helldivers and 40 hours of Helldivers feels the same. It works well if you do it with your friends and get into character and have adventures together. That is why it works well as a game to watch people stream. Very similar to the Among Us phase a few years back. Starship Troopers had its own 28mm tabletop game made by Mongoose Publishing in 2005. And I played a bit of that, but the bugs won every time, because a bug could kill a bunch of mobile infantry, and the mobile infantry soldiers cost more points than a bug. That may have just been my experience. I have been told before that for balance, all the mobile infantry should have the bounce, and one of their actions should always be to bounce away. So the mobile infantry needed more support. If you want to support me, I do have a Ko-fi. It is like Patreon, and you can send one-off tips without needing to promise monthly support. Thank you. 40k is very varied. There are far more factions to play and fight, new scenarios and missions come out regularly, and it can scale from squads fighting to platoon level to massive armies 100 strong on the tabletop. And that is just if you play Imperial Guard or Tyranids. So I'll be staying as a Warhammer 40,000 based channel, don't worry. This next video takes you through the factions in Warhammer 40,000 so that you can choose the one that suits you best. It is like a quiz, so feel free to skip around the video as you answer questions. Or you know, I'm something of a satirist myself, and you can find out why Games Workshop didn't support those Sisters of Battle very much after 1997. For Super Earth, or for the Emperor, I hope you will do your part.